Fear. I think fear is genetically woven into our systemic biology. And when we're living in fear, we're living in survival. And in fear, what we typically do is we're going to select the worst case scenario and then prepare ourselves for when it occurs. Now, when we get it right, we pat ourselves on the shoulder and we say, look how smart I am, so you need to hang out with me, I predicted that. But what happens when you don't get it right? That's called anxiety, that's called insomnia, that's called neurosis, it's called OCD. And the reason being is because as we select that worst case scenario, embrace ourselves emotionally for the outcome, when you combine that thought and the feeling, you move into a state of being. So we can knock our brain and body out of balance just by thought alone. So the fear then becomes an addiction, and we begin to reaffirm that addiction because we keep thinking about the thoughts that create those emotional states. Now, the repetition of that cycle conditions the body to become the mind emotionally. So if you keep doing it, sooner or later you're going to program fear into your body as the mind, which means it's going to have a panic attack without you. Try as you may with your conscious mind to control it, but it has been programmed subconsciously. So one of the things that I know about myself from practicing contemplative practices and then having the privilege of being able to contribute to other people is that if they can truly continuously bring their body back into the present moment in a meditation and practice being present, you can't be afraid if you're in the present moment. And so then what the side effect of that is every time you bring the body back into the present, you're reconditioning it to a new mind, which means the body is no longer the mind. The body, being the animal or the servant, all of a sudden is being conditioned by a new mind. And I have sat with my body for hours and working through different levels of myself. And so I think the biggest fear that we have in society is the fear of the unknown. And that's just been programmed into us, because when you're in fear, the best thing to do is run from the unknown, because the animal in the wild who's hearing something around the corner and doesn't know what it is, it's going to run, better chances of survival. So when we're living by fear and the hormones of stress, we run from the unknown. But if you truly overcome your fear, then the unknown becomes an adventure. And that's when it gets exciting and stimulating. So for me personally, I work every day in overcoming those self-limiting emotions and thoughts. And I look at it like a volume control, which means as you start overcoming your fear, you start to lower the volume to it. When you overcome fear, you overcome anxiety. When you overcome anxiety, you overcome worry. When you overcome worry, you overcome insecurity. When you're no longer insecure, you're less competitive. When you're less competitive, you're less judgmental, and on and on and on. So I think when we begin to select some of the primary emotions and we begin to change them, I think it lowers the volume to all of those other ones. So fear is really selecting the worst case scenario in the future because of some memory in the past. But when we're truly present, and if you're practicing every day in your meditation being present, it should become a skill. And you should be able to bring up that level of presence because you know when you're there and you know when you're not. And so for me, I practice that.
Speaking in front of new audiences, I feel fear, and I guess in the last year, I could probably count it on one hand the times I felt, noticeably afraid was preparing for creating the book, the new book, The Top 10 Things Dead People Want to Tell You, because I'm starting from scratch. I have no material. I've got to create it all. Can I do it? Can I do it well? Is the book going to sell? Is the book going to have a soul? Those early days of writing, the entire first draft for 6 months, I was, you could say, fearful. It was a heavy burden. And when I submitted it to my editor, I said, this book has no soul. But, by taking action and holding on to the dream, the end result, and keep on showing up anyway, so that's my answer. How do you deal with fear? Face it and move on, move through it. But it got to a point where this is like my favorite book that I ever wrote. I am so thrilled with it. I'm almost embarrassed to say that flying from Orlando to London 2 days ago, I couldn't put it down. I was like, wow, that's so good. That's so smart. That's so funny. And it's the same with speaking. Putting together a talk. What do I talk about? How many points? Okay, I'll put all these in. No, that won't fit. No, I've got to fill up more time. I need a PowerPoint, create the slides, delete the slides. It's like hateful. But in the end, it's like, clutch, I got it. And always and only by moving through it. You know, and I tell my audiences, when fear shows up, it invariably means you are exactly where you should be, about to become greater than you've ever been before. It's true.
For me, there are two kinds of fear. There's a kind of rational fear, which is I walk down the street and I see a lion. So it's quite a good idea not to approach the lion, so that's fine. But the other sort, I think, are pretty irrational, in that you're just recycling stuff from the past. So the way I deal with that, as we touched on before, is I go back and find out when I first had that fear. So for example, I think a lot of us at some point have a fear about not having enough money. So I did that recently. I realised that fear is still there. So I went back to when it first happened, which was in my mid-20s when I started a business. And then I just relived it until I got sick of it, and then it went away. But I think we all have those things, right? You kind of drag them around.
I think by nature, because of a relatively insecure kind of upbringing, I'm a very fearful person. For many years, I think I was absolutely crippled by fear, actually. When I think back to how I used to be, I literally lived on my nerves. Probably not very good for my adrenal glands. But in recent years, with the work I've done, if you like, I think I've learned to be able to move through fear by bringing myself back to that place of self-love, if you like, which was another very difficult thing for me to come to terms with. This is very much linked to hearing Louise Hay speak. Louise Hay, obviously, as many people will know, talks about the importance of loving yourself. And she recognises how difficult it is for many of us, and advises that you look in the mirror. I mean, she carries a little mirror in her bra. That's very cool. Whips it out and says, "Here, love you, kid." I don't know if I can go that far, but she does teach you to look in the mirror if you can every single day and say, "I love you." It's unbelievably hard to do at the beginning, but after 30 days, as anything, a new habit's formed, and when you start to get to that stage where you can begin to love yourself, you can come back to that when you feel incredibly fearful. And that's what I've been able to do. It's that coming back to that essential self, if you like, and being able to think, okay, take a deep breath, I am worthy, let's just calm down. And often, if you can still your mind, you can see things much more clearly. And fear is often an illusion.
Fear is something that is pretty much a part of everyone's experience because of our kind of more primitive brain that responds with that flight and fight response. So there's nothing wrong with experiencing fear. The question is, what do you do next with it? So there are all sorts of things. There's a sudden noise will shock people, or information they weren't expecting. But again, the question is, what happens next? Where do we go with that? What responsibility do we take to move back into ourselves and decide how we're going to move forwards, to see what it really is, to put it in perspective. So for me, I don't experience much fear. Most people who hang around me notice that my general experience is intrigue, curiosity, and fun about things, and I find that serves me very well. But I'm not immune to it. Everyone has experiences of it, but you don't want to. I have a rule which is, don't stay in anything for more than 2 minutes. Any of those kind of states. The environment may encourage us to do that, but it's up for us to change that.
I feel fear in my own life. The first thing I do is tapping. It's a really easy stress relief technique where you tap on acupressure points. And what's so freeing about it is that you don't have to deny the fear, you don't have to try positive thinking right away. You give yourself a moment to feel the fear, tap on the points, and you notice your whole body relaxing.
When I feel fear, bizarrely quite a lot, actually. But I'm okay saying that, because I don't think we should pretend that we're perfect. I think it's okay to pretend. It's okay to acknowledge that you're human. and everyone I know feels afraid, everyone feels vulnerable, everyone feels self-conscious about something. I kind of, without having fully read the book Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, I kind of just do that. Because, and what's helped me actually, I've been working on my self-love project, as I've said, for the last couple of years, and what's kind of helped me is acknowledging to myself that sometimes really authentic self-love lies just at the edge of your comfort zone. And if you're willing to go to the edge of your comfort zone, it feels a lot better. And so as long as I know that the reason I'm facing my fear is for that purpose, for that end purpose, then fear doesn't have to be this scary thing. And if I acknowledge that fear will always be there, I don't think there'll ever be a time in my life where I'll not be afraid. As long as you're pushing out your comfort zone, as long as you're taking risks, you're always going to be afraid. And if you can actually acknowledge that and say that's part of being human, it's almost like you can become best buddies with fear. It's like you're hanging out on your porch with fear, drinking a beer and saying, you know what, you're never going to leave my side, are you? So let's just shake on it, we'll agree to be here, and we'll be, you know, by the time we're both 90, we'll be laughing about the fact that I used to run away from you all the time, and it's kind of okay. And as long as I have that kind of relationship, it's a weird little psychological thing, but it kind of works for me. And it comes from me acknowledging that my growth and my authentic self-love and self-esteem lies just at that edge of my comfort zone.
I don't know if, yeah, I do get fearful. Rarely when it's relevant. Like I have random moments of, where I'll just be kind of sitting there and then suddenly I'll be scared and I'll be going, what the hell? Whereas when I'm actually about to do something, I get a bit nervy, but I wouldn't call it fearful. I think for me, what I found so shockingly helpful was when I realized that, when I started, I thought, right, fear means don't. Like, before I learned anything about life. Well, if you're afraid, it's because there's danger. Right? And then I kind of did all the self-help stuff and feel the fear and do it anyways. And I went, oh, fear means do. Well, that's equally stupid. And then I came to see that fear is just thought. It's just a movement of thought. And when those thoughts are in my mind, I feel fear. And then when different thoughts come along, I feel something else. And it became irrelevant. And that's sort of what I noticed. I do get scared, but so what? I remember we used to do these phobia cures on stage where we'd get hundreds of people who had public speaking phobias and get them up in front of each other, and it was great. It was fun, and it was helpful to people. But I remember one time watching a friend of mine who was doing this, and the guy went from a 10 to a 3, where 10 was terrified and 3 was a bit nervy. And then he kind of really worked with this guy to get him from 3 down to a 1. And I just thought, well, I'm at a 3 half the time, and I don't care. What? I get if it's crippling, if you can't do anything, that's a problem. But what's the problem with being nervous sometimes? And so that was kind of it. To me, fear now is like people with red shirts. Right? If you walk about during the day, from time to time, you're going to see people with red shirts. But the idea that it's meaningful, oh, you don't want to go in there, there's people with red shirts in there. Or, I would go on this date, but I saw somebody with a red shirt, so I can't. It's just it's one of the thoughts that we think and one of the feelings that we feel. And except for when you get totally lost in it, which can happen, it's fine.
I think the first thing to recognize about fear is that fear is very frightening. It's so frightening that you can spend a lifetime doing your best not to look at your fears. And in my experience, though, I would have to say that not looking at your fears is more frightening than looking at your fears. So at some point, you've got to bite the bullet. You just got to stop running and you just got to say, I've got to take a look at that fear. My experience with fears is that if you treat them with respect, if you're honest with your fears, if you treat them the way you would like to be treated, so it's like applying the golden rule to your emotions. Hey, how do I want to be treated? I'm going to treat my emotions the same way. When you really look at a fear, then when a fear gets a chance to speak, and it gets a chance to tell you all about itself. It'll either have a message for you, it'll have a lesson for you, or you'll just discover that it just needed to say something and now it's okay. And that's my feeling with fears, you know, it's like if you can face them, then you will be able to use them in some way. Of course it takes courage to do it. Some of the fears that I've had to face, I've been able to face on my own, but many of them I've had to do with some help. You know, the help of a friend, the help of a coach, the help of a mentor. But in the long run, I would say I don't think life, I don't think happiness or success is the absence of fear. I think it is ultimately the capacity to face the fears. And when you do that, there is a liberation. And it's the sort of liberation you experience which is so nice that you often think to yourself, oh, I wish I'd faced that fear earlier.
I've been playing with fear not being fear. I've been playing with fear being joy. Because I believe that we're not really raised as children and young adults in a world and society that says there really is only peace, love and joy. All the great spiritual teachers and masters have always said there is only peace, love and joy, but we're not really taught that. We're taught that there's fear and anguish and separation and hardship and suffering, and that does kind of create that because we have an expectation for that. Growing up, I believe I was taught that whenever I had that intense feeling in my body that my mind labels as fear, it's actually not that. It's actually, my experience of it, it's actually joy. Joy not as in happiness, but joy as in the driving force of creation. See, if I want something, or I want to change something, or improve something, or bring something into my life, then my body will raise my energy up so that it can meet the energy of the thing it wants to create. And often we call that raising up of inner energy fear. And we start pushing the very energy down that's trying to help us create what we want. So for me, I've been playing with healing my relationship with fear, the feelings of fear, letting them be present within me. Because what I noticed is if I could let the feeling of fear be present within me and turn to it and say, you know what, fear, you have as much right to be here as my lungs, liver and lunch, then that, when I stopped resisting fear, when I stopped not wanting it to be there, then it lost its power. You see, fear requires you to not want it to be there for it to have any power over you. If you can turn your attention towards that energy and say, bring it on, and then breathe, by the way. If you can say, bring it on to that energy and breathe, what you'll find, it's a very potent, powerful energy that you can use to create, heal, and transform.
I think the main fear that people do have, it's not losing material things or in the sense of gaining things. I think the real fear that people have inside of them is, you know, letting others down, not being able to do enough for someone else in that way, and that goes with even children, teenagers. It's a fear that has been passed on instead of it being surrounded by love. You know, to be able to tell a person that it's okay, it didn't have to be perfect, you didn't let me down. So we have that huge fear. As we actually grow, people have it, all ages.